"Step away from my podium, sir," Jason Reilly said it loud, slow, deliberate. 40 guests heard it. The older black man in the polo shirt didn't move. "I have a reservation. Check the list." "There is no list for sneakers," Reilly said. He smiled, open, easy, satisfied. He unhooked the rope for the young white man in designer sneakers without looking down. The older man set a black titanium card on the podium. Reilly pushed it aside without reading it. 3 guards closed in. The older man watched them come, still patient, unhurrying his hands, quiet at his sides. He looked up once directly at the blinking red camera above the podium. He didn't look away. He looked back at Reilly and said nothing. 40 people watched, not one moved. Then he reached into his pocket and...
Wrong move. He weaponized a dress code against the owner. Let me take you back.
"I don't care whose name you claim is on the reservation list, sir. The dress code here is strictly enforced, and those sneakers do not meet our standards. Now please step aside before I have my security team remove you." Jason Reilly adjusted his silk tie, his fingers slow, deliberate, performative. His voice carried across the marble lobby like a verdict. It was not raised. It did not need to be. The marble swallowed it whole, and every syllable came back amplified, stripped of warmth, cold as the stone beneath his polished shoes. He stared down at the older man standing quietly before the mahogany podium, his gaze a weapon without a blade. Robert Bennett did not move. He did not flinch. He did not blink. His face held one expression, and it was not anger, not hurt, not the wounded dignity Jason had seen on 100 other faces before. It was something colder than that, something patient, something that looked like a man watching a door lock itself shut. The lobby air shifted. The crystalline clink of silverware from somewhere beyond the oak doors bled through the silence, fragile and incongruent, as though the dining room behind them was entirely unaware of what was unfolding in front of it. Guests near the entrance slowed. A woman in a white dress paused mid-step. A man in his 60s stopped pretending to check his phone. Nobody moved toward the door. Nobody moved away. They simply held still, suspended in that particular kind of silence that only happens when everyone in a room recognizes simultaneously that a line is being crossed. Jason did not notice, or he did not care. He reached forward unhurried and adjusted the single black card that Robert had placed on the edge of the podium. He did not look at it. He picked it up between 2 fingers, set it to the side without glancing at its surface, and let his gaze drift back to the older man with the particular patience of someone who has done this before. The card was heavy. It was solid black titanium matte and dense, the kind of object that announces itself through weight alone. It sat now at the edge of the podium untouched, unremarked upon an argument that had not yet been heard. Robert's hands did not reach for it. His breathing did not change. He stood in a simple polo shirt, pale blue, perfectly fitted, pressed without being fussy. Clean white sneakers. No flash, no ornament, no signal to the uninitiated that this man represented anything beyond what he appeared to be. That was Jason had decided in the first 3 seconds the entire point. "Sir," Jason said again, drawing the word out, shaping it into something that was not quite a courtesy and not quite a threat. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who considered himself fluent in conflict. "I'm going to ask you one final time. Step outside or I will have you removed." Robert looked at him. Just that. He looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a scan, unhurried, thorough, already 10 steps ahead. "My name is on the reservation," Robert said. His voice was quiet, not soft. There is a difference. Soft has edges that bend. Quiet has edges that do not. "I'd like you to check the list." "The list," Jason said, "is not the issue." He let his eyes travel very briefly, very deliberately from Robert's collar to his shoes and back. A full-body audit. Quick, public, impossible to misread. "The issue is that this establishment has a dress code, and those shoes are in violation of it. That is the policy. It applies to everyone." It did not apply to everyone. Robert did not say that yet. He was a patient man. He had learned patience in places where impatience got people killed, and he carried it now the way he carried everything from that life, quietly in the architecture of his stillness. He had arrived at the podium 6 minutes ago. He had stated his name. He had watched Jason's eyes move to his shoes, then back to his face, then to the reservation book which Jason had not opened. He had placed the titanium card on the podium. He had watched Jason push it aside without reading it. He understood then what kind of situation this was. He understood with precision what kind of man Jason Reilly was. A small, specific kind of man. The kind who keeps a door locked not because the door needs to be locked, but because having the key feels good. Logan Sinclair stood 20 feet back near the coat check. He was 23 years old, 4 months into his first real job, still learning the geography of his own authority, still calibrating which situations required him to speak and which required him to stay quiet. He had been quiet for 6 minutes. He had watched his manager push the card aside. He had watched the guests freeze. He had watched a man old enough to be his grandfather stand in polished sneakers and absorb the kind of contempt that leaves no bruise. His hands gripped the coat check counter at his hip. His knuckles had gone pale. He wanted to say something. He had not said anything yet. He was afraid of the answer it would cost him. "Check the list," Robert said again. Still quiet, still patient. Not a question this time. Not a request. A statement the shape of a rope, waiting to see what a man would do with it. Jason's jaw set. He was not accustomed to being repeated at. He was accustomed to compliance to the small, rapid capitulation of people who recognize the podium, the suit, the title. He was accustomed to the moment when a person's eyes dropped, when their shoulders fell, when the argument left them and they turned toward the door. Robert's eyes had not dropped. His shoulders had not moved. "I am not going to check the list," Jason said, "because the list is not the issue. I explained the issue. The issue is the dress code." He crossed his arms. "We're done here." Robert's fingers moved, barely, a small rhythmic tap against his thigh. 3 beats, a pause. 3 beats again. It was not frustration. It was not nervous energy. It was something else entirely, something that had to do with the way a man holds himself when he has counted down from high numbers in very loud places and learned to keep his hands from doing anything they would later regret. He tapped 3 more times, stopped. Jason did not notice the gesture. He was watching the entrance signaling subtly to the 2 security guards stationed near the front doors. They moved forward a half step. Just a half step. A suggestion, not a commitment. Robert noticed. He always noticed things like that. He had spent 30 years noticing the exact moment when a situation shifts from verbal to physical, and he had spent those same years making sure in every case that he was already 3 steps ahead of the shift. His eyes moved very briefly to the security camera mounted directly above the podium. The red light blinked. Recording. He looked at it for exactly 1 second. Then he looked back at Jason. "I have a reservation," Robert said. His voice had not changed. Not in volume, not in temperature, not in tone. "The reservation is under Bennett. I've been a guest of this establishment for 11 years. I would like you to look at the list, and I would like you to look at the card I placed on your podium." Jason's hand came down flat on the podium. A percussive sound, sharp and deliberate, designed to startle. Several guests flinched. Robert did not. "I am not going to do that," Jason said. His voice had acquired an edge, now something that was not quite contained, something that wanted to expand. He leaned forward slightly over the mahogany surface, and the scent of his cologne came with him, heavy and synthetic, an olfactory extension of his authority. "What I am going to do is ask you for the last time to step outside, or I will have these gentlemen assist you." He gestured to the guards. Both of them moved forward now, a full step, no longer a suggestion. Robert looked at the guards. He looked at Jason. He looked at Logan, who stood at the coat check 20 feet away, his face a study in anguish paralysis, jaw-tight eyes, wide hands, white on the counter. Robert did not look afraid. He did not look angry. He looked, if anything, like a man who had just confirmed something he already knew and was now simply waiting for the information to become useful. He had no idea that the next person to walk through those doors would hand Jason the weapon he was about to use against himself. He didn't know that yet, but Robert did. The doors opened, not dramatically, not with the weight of what they were about to carry. They swung wide on quiet hinges, admitting a gust of evening air, and with it a man in his mid-30s wearing a graphic t-shirt that read something illegible in distressed lettering, a pair of slim chinos and sneakers that cost 4 times what Robert's cost. Designer sneakers. The kind with a specific name that people said in a certain tone. They were loud shoes, intentional shoes that announced themselves before their owner did. The man's name was Carter Wills. He was 26 floors up, in the kind of wealth that gets inherited rather than built, and he walked the way people walk, when every room they've ever entered has rearranged itself around them. Jason saw him. The transformation was immediate, not gradual, not measured, immediate, total, and obscene in its completeness. The set of Jason's jaw changed. His shoulders dropped a 1/4 inch, releasing a tension that had apparently been held in reserve specifically for Robert. His chin came up. His lips parted. And then he smiled. Not the smile he had given Robert. That smile had been a tool controlled and weaponized. This one was different. This one had warmth in it. "Mr. Wills?" Jason stepped out from behind the podium, actually stepped out, abandoning the fortress of mahogany and guilt that he had kept with such discipline between himself and Robert for the past 8 minutes. He moved toward Carter Wills with the particular velocity of a man who has spotted someone important and does not want the importance to go unacknowledged. "We've been expecting you." He reached the velvet rope. His hand found the brass post. He unhooked it. The rope fell in a gentle arc, and Carter Wills walked through the gap without breaking stride, without acknowledgement, without the small nod of gratitude that most people would offer. He didn't need to offer it. People like Carter Wills did not pay social debts to the people who opened doors for them. They simply walked through. Jason walked with him, half a step behind, angled forward in the posture of a man attending to someone he considered important. He said something quiet. Carter laughed. They moved toward the heavy oak doors of the private dining room. They did not stop at the podium. The reservation book was not consulted. The dress code was not mentioned. The sneakers, white and deliberate and twice as casual as Robert's, did not draw a single word. Robert watched all of it. He stood in the same position he had occupied for the past 9 minutes, his hands at his sides, his face unchanged. He had not moved. He had not been asked to move. The guards, momentarily distracted by the new arrival, had each taken a half step back, recalibrating. The lobby, which had been suspended in its particular horrified hush, now breathed again, the guests shifting, exchanging glances, recrossing legs, clearing throats. Logan had not moved at all. He stood at the coat check with his hands flat on the counter now, no longer gripping, just pressing as though the surface were the only steady thing in the room. His eyes moved between Robert and the retreating back of Carter Wills. His expression had shifted from anxious to something tighter, something that had a different name. Jason returned to the podium. He walked back with the same unhurried authority, smoothed the front of his jacket with one hand, and looked at Robert as though he had briefly forgotten Robert was there and was now mildly displeased to find him still standing. He did not say anything immediately. He let the silence do the work. Robert spoke first. "That man," he said, "was wearing sneakers." His voice was even measured, informational. He was not accusing. He was establishing a fact. The way a lawyer establishes a fact, without inflection, without editorializing, setting it down in the record where it could not be denied. Jason tilted his head. A minimal gesture controlled the head movement of a man who has heard an argument he finds tedious. "Mr. Wills is a known guest," he said. "He has a relationship with this establishment." "I have a relationship with this establishment," Robert said. 11 years. Jason's expression did not change. That was the tell. It did not harden, did not falter, did not flicker with the small discomfort of a man who knows he has been caught. It simply held flat and certain the expression of a man who does not believe he needs to justify himself. The policy, he said, is applied at the discretion of management. Robert looked at him, a long, level look. That sentence, Robert said quietly, is not a policy. That is the absence of one. Jason leaned forward over the podium. The cologne arrived again, heavy, territorial, the scent of a man who has decided that proximity is a form of dominance. Sir, the word again, slow, deliberate. I have been patient with you. I have explained the situation clearly and multiple times. You are not on the list as I can verify it. You are in violation of our dress standards and you are disrupting the experience of our other guests. He paused. His eyes moved once to the guards. They moved forward. I'm going to ask you to leave now. Robert said nothing for a moment. He, the man Jason had not yet looked at fully, the man whose card sat unread on the edge of the podium, stood perfectly still. His fingers moved again. The same rhythm. 3 beats. A pause. 3 beats. He was not performing calm. He was not managing an emotion that wanted to surface. He was simply actually calm, the way a man is calm who has made a decision and is waiting for the right moment to execute it. He looked at the card on the podium. He looked at Jason. He looked for 1 measured second up at the blinking red light of the camera above the mahogany station. Something behind his eyes noted it, filed it. Then he looked back at Jason, and his voice when it came was exactly the same temperature it had been for the past 9 minutes. Patient, precise, without a single frayed edge. You let him in, Robert said, wearing the same shoes you cited as my violation. You checked no list. You applied no policy. You opened a rope for 1 man and closed a door on another. He paused. 1 beat. I want that noted. Jason smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed he had already won. He had closed the case. He had categorized the situation, defined its outcome, and was now simply waiting for the older man in the polo shirt to finish speaking so that the conclusion could proceed. He had no idea what he had just handed over. He had said it out loud, on camera, with a witness who had heard every word. He had thought he was closing a door. He had built the weapon himself, loaded it himself, and set it down on the podium between them without knowing what he had done. Jason's hand moved to the radio on the nearest guard's belt, not his own radio. The gesture was precise, deliberate, a man reaching not for a tool but for a symbol. He did not take it. He simply touched it 1 finger against the black casing and looked at Robert with the expression of someone who has just drawn a card they believe ends the game. Gentlemen, he said. His voice had found a new register, lower, more formal. The register of a man issuing an instruction he intends to have documented. Please assist our guest in locating the exit. The 3 guards moved, not rushing, moving the way trained men move when they want to communicate inevitability without triggering a response. They spread, slightly adjusting their positions around the perimeter of Robert's space. The synchronized weight of their boots on the marble floor arrived as a low, rhythmic percussion, deliberate, and measured a sound designed to communicate 1 thing. You are surrounded. Robert did not look at them. He looked at Jason. I'd like to know, Robert said, the specific clause of your establishment's dress code that you were citing. Jason blinked. The question was unexpected. Not because it was aggressive, because it wasn't. It was asked the way a professor asks a question to which they already have the answer, patient-specific, without heat. I've explained the policy, Jason said. The specific clause, Robert said again. Same tone, same temperature, not louder, just more precise. Jason's jaw shifted. A small movement, involuntary. The tell of a man who has built his authority on the performance of certainty and has just encountered a question that requires the actual substance beneath it. Footwear must be formal or smart casual, he said, as per our guest standards. And the specific language, Robert said, governing managerial discretion in applying that standard. A pause. Longer than Jason intended. Management reserves the right, he said slowly, to make determinations in line with the establishment's standards. On what basis, Robert said, is that determination made? Jason straightened. His arms came across his chest, the posture of a man closing himself off, armoring up, recognizing that the ground beneath the conversation had shifted without his permission. On the basis of my professional judgment, he said. His voice had acquired an edge now bright and thin, which I've exercised, and which I am not required to justify to you. You exercised it differently, Robert said, for 2 guests in identical footwear in the same 6-minute window in front of 40 witnesses. He did not point at the witnesses. He did not gesture toward the lobby. He simply said it flat and factual the way a man states coordinates. I'd like that difference explained. The lobby had gone still again. Not the uncertain stillness of before. This stillness had a different quality, sharper, more focused, the stillness of people who have realized they are watching something that is going to matter. A woman near the entrance had her phone at her side screen facing forward. She had not raised it. She had not lowered it. She was simply holding it in the manner of someone who had not yet made a decision. Jason looked at Robert. He looked at the guards. He looked at the lobby, at the faces that were no longer pretending not to watch, at the phone held half-ready near the entrance, at Logan still fixed at the coat check, pale and rigid. He looked back at Robert. "I'm not going to stand here," he said, and his voice had lost some of its architecture now, some of the careful construction that kept it from revealing what was underneath, "and be interrogated by a man I've asked to leave. This conversation is over." He nodded to the guards. 2 of them stepped forward. Close now. The nearest one was an arm's length from Robert's shoulder. Robert did not step back. He stood still and complete like a structure that has been tested by weather before. He recited from memory without pause, without consulting anything, the full text of the corporate anti-discrimination policy governing guest admission standards for the hospitality group that owned this building. Every clause, every subsection, word for word. His voice did not rise. He spoke the language of the policy, the way a man speaks a language he learned before English, automatically, fluently, without needing to think about the grammar. He finished. He looked at Jason. That policy, he said, was violated at 8:47 this evening in this lobby with a documented witness and active surveillance recording. The violation is yours, not mine. Jason's face had changed, not collapsed, not cracked, but something behind it had shifted the way a structure shifts before it gives. He had expected tears, maybe. Argument, certainly. The hot, undisciplined anger of a man who has been humiliated and is running out of options. He had not expected this. He had not expected a man who could recite the policy back to him from memory. He had not expected to be made into the record. He had not expected the camera to matter. "Remove him," Jason said. His voice was flat now, not controlled. Flat in the way a voice goes flat when control has been replaced by something simpler. The guards moved. The nearest one put a hand on Robert's arm. Robert looked at the hand. He looked at the guard's face. The guard, who was 28 years old and had been in this job for 14 months, felt something in Robert's look that he could not name precisely, but that made him involuntarily loosen his grip by half. Robert looked up at the camera. The red light blinked, still recording. He looked at Jason. He looked at Logan, 20 feet back, who had his mouth open now, who was 2 seconds away from saying something, whose entire body was pitched forward in the posture of a person choosing between safety and conscience. Robert said nothing. He did not need to. He had lit the fuse. He could only wait for the explosion.
Wait. He actually called security to physically remove a man, just for asking to be treated equally. If that were me, I would have lost my mind right there in the lobby. Imagine standing in that room, surrounded by guards, while a smug manager smiles at your humiliation. The audacity is real.
The second guard moved to Robert's left, the third positioned at his back. 3 points of a triangle deliberate practice the geometry of removal. The lobby had stopped pretending entirely now. No one consulted a phone. No one examined a menu. They watched openly, the way people watch things they know they will describe later, committing details to memory. Filing the image of an older man in a polo shirt surrounded by 3 guards in a marble lobby, while a manager in a bespoke suit stood behind a mahogany podium and looked satisfied. Jason crossed his arms. The satisfaction was visible, settled the expression of a man who has restored order to a situation that had briefly threatened to develop an argument. He surveyed the lobby with the proprietary calm of someone who believes the room belongs to him, which in every way that he currently understood the word, belong it did. Logan moved, not far. 1 step out from behind the coat check counter, 1 foot forward, the physical expression of a decision that had not yet fully committed to itself. His mouth opened. "Sir," he said. His voice came out smaller than he intended. It landed in the lobby without weight, a word that had left his body before it was ready. Jason turned, slowly. He turned the way people turn when they have all the time in the world and want you to know it. He looked at Logan with an expression that was not anger. It was something more efficient than anger. It was assessment. "Back to your station," Jason said. Logan's jaw tightened. He was 23 years old and afraid those 2 facts operated in him simultaneously and neither one was winning cleanly. He had watched 8 minutes of this. He had watched the card get pushed aside. He had watched the rope come down for Carter Wills and his designer sneakers without a word said, without a list checked, without a standard applied. He had watched a man recite corporate policy from memory and be told it didn't matter. His foot stayed forward. "He has a reservation," Logan said, louder this time. Not loud, louder. The difference between a whisper and a word. "I can verify it. The name Bennett is in the system. I checked it myself when he came in." The lobby absorbed this. A small shift moved through the guests, barely visible, the collective adjustment of people who have just received new information and are recalibrating what they are watching. Jason looked at Logan for a long moment. The look had layers. At the surface, it was calm. Beneath that, it was a warning. Beneath that, something colder, the specific temperature of a man deciding how to make an example. "Logan," he said. His voice was quiet. Intimate almost in the way that very specific threats are intimate. "You are 4 months into your probationary period. I would encourage you to consider your position carefully before you involve yourself in a situation that does not concern you." Logan's other foot almost moved back, almost. He felt the pull of it, the gravitational logic of self-preservation, the voice in his chest that knew exactly what Jason meant and what it would cost to keep standing forward. His eyes moved to Robert. Robert was looking at him, not pleading, not urging, just looking the way a man looks at someone he is paying attention to, the way a person looks when they want you to know that what you do next will be seen and remembered. Logan stayed where he was, 1 foot forward, barely, but forward. "His name," Logan said, "is in the book." Jason turned back to face the lobby fully. He uncrossed his arms. He placed both hands flat on the podium, deliberate architectural, reasserting the geography of authority. "Logan," he said without turning, "return to your station. This is your final instruction on the matter." A pause, 1 beat. "You will not receive another." Logan stepped back, not because he wanted to, because the math of the moment had shifted beneath him, because he was 23 and 4 months probationary and the rent was real, and because the voice in his chest that knew things had gotten louder and was saying, "Not yet, not like this. Wait." He stepped back behind the counter. His hands found the surface again. His knuckles went pale. He did not look away from Robert. Robert had watched all of it. He had watched Logan step forward. He had watched Logan get threatened. He had watched Logan step back, He had noted the sequence with the precision of a man who catalogs things, who has spent decades understanding that the people who hesitate at the edges of a situation are sometimes the most important people in it. He filed Logan. He would need him later. The guards had not loosened their positions. The triangle held. The nearest one had his hand on Robert's arm again, firmer this time, and Robert allowed it because the alternative was a physical confrontation in a marble lobby, and a physical confrontation in a marble lobby was not the tool he intended to use. His watch caught the light as his arm was held, a vintage piece. Military issue, the kind that had a specific designation and a specific history, worn and unpolished. The kind of object that did not belong in this lobby, according to every visual rule Jason had assembled around himself. It was also like the titanium card still sitting unread on the edge of the podium, something that Jason had not looked at closely enough. Robert looked at his watch, 7:54. He had been standing in this lobby for 17 minutes. He thought about the number. He thought about what 17 minutes could do when they were the right 17 minutes. He thought about a phone call that had not yet been made, and about how short that call would need to be, and about the 11 words he already knew he would say when he made it. Jason had crossed his arms again. The look on his face was triumph, settled and complete. He had isolated the man. He had silenced the witness. He had secured the guards. He believed the situation was resolved. He was about to pull the trigger on his own career. Robert was not going to stop him. If you want to see how this entitled manager's ego gets systematically obliterated, you know what to do. Now back to Robert. 23 minutes. That was how long Robert Bennett had been standing in his own lobby while a man in a borrowed suit held a rope over his head and called it policy. 23 minutes of marble and cologne and the specific practiced contempt of someone who had learned that authority and cruelty could wear the same face if you pressed the collar flat enough. The guards had not moved. The triangle held. The nearest one had both hands on Robert's arm, now not dragging, not yet, but present, a physical argument that had not yet reached its conclusion. The lobby had thinned slightly. Two couples near the entrance had left quietly without making a scene, the particular exit of people who are uncomfortable and have decided that discomfort is someone else's problem. The woman with the phone was still there. She had not raised it. She had not lowered it. She was in the specific paralysis of someone who knows that recording a thing and not recording a thing are both decisions with consequences, and she had not yet decided which consequence she could live with. Logan stood at the coat check, still, pale, his hands flat on the counter, his eyes on Robert. He had not looked away since stepping back behind the station. He was doing the only thing left available to him. He was watching. He was making sure that whatever happened next happened in front of a face that would remember it. Jason came around the podium. This was new. He had kept the mahogany between them for 23 minutes. Used it the way men use desks and counters and barriers, as extensions of authority, as physical arguments for hierarchy. Now he abandoned it. He walked around it and stood in the open lobby 3 feet from Robert, close enough that the cologne was no longer background, no longer ambient. It was total. "I'm going to be very direct with you," Jason said. His voice had a new quality, quieter, almost conversational. The quiet of a man who no longer needs volume because he believes the outcome is already decided. "I am calling the police. I am going to have you charged with trespassing and with disrupting the operation of a private establishment. That charge will be on record." He paused. He let it land. "I would encourage you to leave now while that is still an option." The lobby heard it. Every word. The woman with the phone, the remaining guests, the 2 guards flanking, and the one at Robert's back. Logan heard it. His jaw moved, almost speaking, then didn't. Robert heard it. He stood inside the triangle of guards, and the weight of the cologne and the very specific silence of a room that had just watched a man threaten to call the police on another man for asking to be let into a restaurant where his name was in the book. He was alone. That was the fact of it, stripped of everything else. He was alone in a room full of people, surrounded by men being paid to remove him, with a witness who had been threatened into silence, and a card on a podium that no one had read, and a camera overhead that had been recording for 23 minutes and might record 23 more before anyone looked at the footage. And here is where the narrator must be honest. Because there is a version of this story where the right thing to do is walk out, where a man weighs his dignity against the mathematics of the situation and decides that a lobby is not worth it. That the guards are real and the threat is real, and the police, when they arrive, will not ask whose name is in the book before they make their own set of decisions. There is a version of this where the rational calculation is retreat. Robert had not become what he was by choosing the rational calculation when the right one was available instead. But he felt it. That is the truth of the darkest moment. Not that he broke. He did not break. But he felt the weight of it, the specific gravity of being made small in a space you own, of having your card pushed aside without being read, of watching a younger man walk through a rope you are being denied, of reciting the law back to the man breaking it and being told the law does not apply to you here. Not tonight, not in these shoes. He felt it the way a structure feels load, not collapsing, but registering. His fingers were still. He had stopped tapping. The rhythm that had moved through his hand for 23 minutes, the cadence he had carried since the first deployment, the 3-beat measure that meant I am here, I am present, I am not going anywhere, had gone quiet. That was the tell, not visible to Jason, not visible to the guards or the remaining guests. Visible maybe to Logan, who had been watching his hands since the beginning and noticed now that they had stopped moving. Visible to no one else. Robert reached into his pocket. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his phone. It was a plain device, dark, unremarkable, the kind of phone that holds no information about its owner in its appearance. He looked at it for a moment. Jason watched him. A flicker of something crossed Jason's face, curiosity maybe, or the early edge of unease, quickly suppressed, quickly covered by the return of the smug, settled certainty that had been his expression for most of the last half hour. "Calling someone," Jason said. The smile was back, thin, confident. "It won't change the situation." Robert did not look up. He found the number. He pressed dial. He held the phone to his ear. 3 seconds of silence. Someone answered. Robert spoke. 10 seconds. Exactly 10. 3 sentences quiet, complete the tone of a man issuing an instruction he has issued before in rooms with much higher stakes than this one. "Execute Protocol Omega." He lowered the phone. He locked the screen. The small, cold, metallic click of it filled the nearest foot of air between them. He put the phone back in his pocket. He looked at Jason. His face had not changed. But something had. Something in the lobby had changed, a pressure differential, invisible, unnameable, the atmospheric shift that arrives before weather. Jason did not feel it yet. He would. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. That was how long it took. Robert stood inside the triangle of guards and watched the clock in his head, the way he had watched clocks in rooms where time was the only variable still in play. Jason had retreated behind the podium again. He had made the call he promised, or pretended to, holding the gold-plated lobby phone to his ear with the performance of a man whose next move was already scripted. He set it down without visible result and rearranged his expression into something that said the machinery was in motion, that the outcome was settled, that Robert Bennett should use the next several minutes to make peace with the fact that he had lost. Logan had not moved. His hands were still flat on the counter. His eyes had not left Robert. He was 23 years old, and he had been watching a man absorb 27 minutes of deliberate, systematic humiliation without once raising his voice, without once losing the particular quality of stillness that Logan did not yet have a word for. But recognize the way you recognize something you have never seen before and understand immediately is rare. The woman with the phone was still there, still holding it, still deciding. Outside, the evening had continued without them, cars moving the city, doing what cities do, indifferent to the lobby and its arrangements. And then the sound arrived, not from inside, from outside. The shriek of tires on pavement, sudden and total, cutting through the ambient noise of the street, with the specific violence of something moving very fast and stopping very hard. Not one vehicle, multiple. The sound of brakes repeated, overlapping, a fleet of them pulling hard to the curb in the kind of coordinated stop that does not happen accidentally. The lobby windows lit briefly with the sweep of headlights. Black. All of them black. Then doors. The sound of doors, multiple, simultaneous, the percussive crack of them opening and the shorter, harder sound of them closing, fast, purposeful, the rhythm of people who have been trained to exit vehicles quickly. Jason looked at the entrance. His expression had not changed yet. It was in the process of changing. You could see it beginning the first fracture in the settled certainty the moment when the scaffolding starts to register the load. The front doors opened. Edward Cromwell came through them at a velocity that was not quite running, but was everything running as except the visual. He was 51 years old, silver-haired, dressed in the kind of suit that cost more than Logan's monthly salary, and his face was the face of a man who has received information and has been moving toward its source ever since. Sweat at his temple, collar slightly displaced, the specific dishevelment of someone who has been moving fast in formal clothes. Behind him, 4 men in dark suits filed through the entrance. They moved with the quiet, coordinated efficiency of people whose job is to be present without being noticed until they are needed. They arranged themselves without instruction in a loose formation behind Edward, and they were still. Edward crossed the lobby in 9 steps. He did not look at Jason. He did not look at the guards. He did not look at the remaining guests or the woman with the phone or the mahogany podium or any of the architectural authority Jason had spent the evening arranging around himself. He looked at Robert, and he stopped, and he bowed. Not a nod, not the small performative incline of a professional greeting. A bow, full deep, the kind that carries meaning, that says something specific about the relationship between the person bowing and the person being bowed to. Mr. Chairman, his voice was not quiet. He intended it to carry. It carried. I am deeply, unreservedly sorry. This should never have happened. I am here. He straightened. His eyes moved to the guards. One look. They released Robert's arms and stepped back in unison, the triangle dissolving as quickly as it had formed, 3 large men suddenly finding reasons to look at the floor. Edward's hand moved to the podium. He found the titanium card where Jason had set it aside without reading it. He picked it up. He held it between both hands briefly, the way you hold something you should have been holding all along. He turned to the lobby. He held the card up. His voice when he spoke was clear and carrying, and had the quality of a man making a statement he intends to be heard by everyone present. This card identifies the holder as Robert Bennett, chairman of the board of Cromwell Hospitality Group. He paused. 1 beat. The parent company of this establishment, and every establishment in this building, and the building itself. The lobby did not make a sound, not one sound. The silverware beyond the oak doors had gone quiet, as though even the dining room understood that something had changed. Logan's hands came off the counter. He did not move. He simply stopped pressing, stopped holding himself in place, because the thing he had been bracing against had shifted, and the counter no longer needed to be held. The woman with the phone raised it. Jason had not moved. He stood behind the podium, and he was for the first time in 30 minutes entirely still. Not the controlled stillness of a man managing a situation. The stillness of a man who has just understood the full geometry of what he has done and cannot yet locate a response equal to it. His face was doing several things at once, none of them recoverable. Robert looked at him. He had not moved from the position he had occupied for 31 minutes. He stood in his polo shirt and his clean white sneakers, and he looked at Jason Reilly with the same expression he had held since the beginning. Not triumph, not anger, not the satisfaction of a man watching an enemy fall. Something colder than all of those. Recognition. The specific patient recognition of a man who knew exactly what was going to happen and waited for it to happen and is now simply present while it does. He said nothing. He did not need to. The system didn't just lock him out. It called down the thunder. Edward Cromwell turned to face Jason Reilly. He did not hurry. He had the particular unhurriedness of a man for whom the outcome is already decided, and the only remaining variable is how it is administered. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Jason the way you look at a problem you have fully diagnosed and are now moving to correct. "Your name," Edward said, "is Jason Reilly. You hold the title of General Manager of this establishment effective as of 14 months ago." He paused. One beat. "You held it." Jason opened his mouth. Edward continued. "In the past 31 minutes, you denied entry to the chairman of the board of the parent company of this establishment, citing a dress code you applied selectively on camera in front of no fewer than 40 witnesses. You pushed aside his identification without examining it. You threatened him with arrest. You had him physically restrained by security personnel." He stopped. He looked at Jason without blinking. "You also threatened a junior staff member with termination for attempting to provide accurate information." His eyes moved briefly to Logan, then back. "That is the record. It is documented. It is on that camera," he pointed. The camera above the podium, the one with the red light that had been blinking for 31 minutes. The one Robert had looked at in Chapter 3 deliberately for exactly 1 second, making sure the angle was right, making sure the podium and the guests and Jason's face and the velvet rope and Carter Wills walking through it were all inside the frame. Jason's hand moved to his lapel, a reflex unconscious, the hand of a man reaching for something that has defined him, the gold manager's pin. Small, weighted the physical proof of 14 months of authority in this building. Edward reached forward. His hand closed over the pin. He removed it. The small sound it made leaving the fabric was precise and final, the sound of a period at the end of a sentence that has been a long time coming. He set it on the podium between them. He did not look at it again. "Your employment with Cromwell Hospitality Group," Edward said, "is terminated effective now. HR will contact you regarding the terms. You will not return to this building in a professional capacity." Jason's face had completed its journey. The scaffolding had come down entirely. What remained was not anger, not protest, not the hot, indignant energy of a man who believes he has been wronged. It was something smaller than that. The specific, airless quality of a man who has run the full length of his certainty and found the edge. He looked at the pin on the podium. He looked at Robert. Robert looked back at him, still, patient, the same face he had worn for 31 minutes. Then Robert turned to Edward. His voice when he spoke was quiet and complete, the voice of a man issuing a final instruction in a room where all the prior instructions have already been carried out. "The footage," he said, "from that camera, I want it pulled and attached to every termination file processed tonight." Edward nodded. He turned to the senior man in the dark suits behind him who was already moving, already speaking quietly into a device at his collar. Robert looked at the floor, the entire floor. Not the marble beneath his sneakers specifically, but the room, the lobby, the establishment, the walls and the lights and the mahogany podium and the velvet rope, still unhooked from when Carter Wills had walked through it and no one had reattached it. He took his time. He was in no hurry. He had been in no hurry for 31 minutes, and he was not going to start now. "Everyone on shift tonight," he said. He said it to Edward, but he said it at a volume the lobby could hear. "Every member of staff who was present in this room during the incident." A pause, with the exception of one. He did not look at Logan. He did not need to. Edward understood. Edward turned to the floor supervisor who had materialized from somewhere near the dining room entrance, pale and rigid, and delivered the instruction in 4 words. The floor supervisor's face went the color of the marble. It was done quickly. It was not a conversation. There was no negotiation, no appeal, no period of review. The staff who had stood in this lobby for 31 minutes and said nothing, who had watched the card get pushed aside, who had watched the rope go up for one man and down for another, who had watched a junior waiter get threatened for trying to tell the truth, who had decided each in their own private calculation that their silence was not a choice, but simply the absence of one, they were informed. They left. The lobby, which had been full, became quiet in a different way than it had been quiet before. Not the tense, suspended quiet of a room waiting for something to happen. The settled quiet of a room where something has been resolved. Jason was still standing at the podium. He had not moved since the pin came off. He was looking at the surface of the mahogany at the titanium card Edward had set down at the small gold pin beside it. He was, Robert thought, a man in the process of understanding that the symbols he had arranged around himself were not his. They had never been his. He had been holding them for someone else the entire time, and the someone else had just arrived to collect them. The two security guards who had been part of the triangle appeared at Jason's sides, his own guards, the guards he had directed at Robert 40 minutes ago. They did not touch him. They simply stood there, present, patient, in the particular posture of men waiting for a person to begin moving. Jason looked at them. He looked at the lobby. He looked once at Robert. Robert had already turned away. He was walking. Past the podium, past the velvet rope, past the place where the triangle had been toward the heavy oak doors of the private dining room. He passed Logan on his way. Logan was standing very still, his eyes bright, his jaw set, his hands no longer white at the knuckles. Robert slowed. He did not stop. He looked at Logan with the same level attention he had given everything else in this room tonight, complete, unhurried, seeing the thing fully. "I believe," Robert said, "I had a reservation, Logan." He walked through the oak doors. They closed behind him. Behind him, the glass doors of the lobby locked. Jason Reilly stood on the hot pavement outside in his bespoke suit in the evening air with no pin on his lapel and no door that would open for him. And the lobby he had controlled for 14 months arranged itself around his absence as though he had never been there at all.
This story is made up, but that feeling of absolute justice against a racist gatekeeper, that hits right in your core. I have to confess, watching a broken system get weaponized against the very bully hiding behind it is my absolute favorite kind of karma. Have you ever encountered a manager who thought they were untouchable? Drop a comment below, like, share, and subscribe.